I'm a 28-year-old woman, and if you grew up in a family like mine, you'd know that every dinner, party, and neighborhood event had to look perfect. My parents thrived on polished photos and glowing comments from neighbors. Table settings matched down to the napkin rings, and no one ever left the house with a single wrinkle in their clothes. Keeping up that image was their sport, and they expected my younger sister Ava and me to play along. From the outside, we looked like the picture of a close family. Ava and I were only 3 years apart, and used to team up on school projects and backyard games. But under all that polish, there was always a quiet contest. Who had the better outfit? Who got invited to more birthday parties? Who earned the most praise at parent-teacher night? It was never a full-on fight, just a steady undercurrent that our parents never discouraged. They'd smile and say family first, like it was a magic phrase that kept everything friendly. The truth was, it just meant we had to smooth things over fast so no one else could see a crack in the perfect picture. I took a different path than Ava as we got older. I picked a steady job at a design firm and climbed the ladder carefully, budgeting every raise and overtime check so I could buy my own place. Eva chased whatever caught her eye. A new hairstyle every month, a different boyfriend every season, and trips she booked on a whim. She worked part-time at a boutique furniture store and said it gave her flexibility, which mostly meant freedom to keep changing plans. By last year, I'd worked my way up to project manager, a promotion that came with long hours and a sense of hard-won stability. My parents were thrilled to brag about it to their friends, and I was proud of the milestone even if it meant late nights and careful budgeting. During a family brunch not long after that promotion, we were all laughing about old times when I mentioned a tiny joint savings account Ava and I had opened as teenagers. Back then, we joked about using it someday for a sister's business, maybe a coffee shop with her eye for decor and my knack for design. It was nothing more than a running joke, but I guess nostalgia made me bring it up. Our parents loved the idea. They raised their glasses and toasted us like we were still those two kids plotting a dream. My dad even said Ava could handle interiors if we ever did it, since she worked at that furniture store. It felt like harmless family banter, the kind that fades by dessert. Weeks passed, and I forgot about it, until an email from the bank popped up on my phone while I was on a late work call. It was a simple alert about a large withdrawal from that old account. I almost ignored it. Sure, it was a mistake. We'd left maybe a few thousand in there, untouched for years. After the call, I rang the bank and learned the transfer was real, done online with the correct credentials. At first, I thought maybe the system glitched or someone hacked us, but the account still listed both Ava and me as joint owners. No extra approval was needed. The number on the alert matched the amount we'd once saved together. The realization settled in slow but heavy. Whoever moved the money had every right to. Legally, anyway. I called Ava the next evening while walking home from the office. She picked up on the second ring and sounded cheerful until I mentioned the account. She didn't hesitate or stumble. She just said she borrowed the money for a down payment on a new luxury car and would pay it back in a month. Like it was no big deal. No question, no warning, just took it. That night at my parents' place, I brought it up over dinner, hoping maybe they'd see why I was upset. Ava sat across from me, scrolling on her phone, barely looking up. My parents exchanged a glance and told me not to overreact. My mom said, "It's just money. You're doing so well financially." My dad added that Ava probably had a good reason and would return it soon. It felt like they'd already decided my promotion meant I wouldn't miss the cash. I didn't shout. I didn't even argue. I finished my meal, said I had an early morning, and left. Inside, I burned. But years in this family taught me that loud confrontations only feed the too dramatic label they love to use. Instead, I went home and decided to keep my eyes open and gather every detail before making my next move. That night, I printed every bank statement and saved screenshots of the transactions. I kept them in a neat folder on my desk. I wasn't sure what I'd do yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let a casual brunch conversation and an old joint account become an excuse for Ava or anyone else to walk over me again. I started by calling the bank the next morning to request every statement from that joint account for the last year. The clerk promised to email a secure PDF within a few hours. By lunchtime, it landed in my inbox. The numbers told a quiet story, not one big withdrawal, but a trail of smaller transfers that added up fast. The earliest was 6 months ago, a few $100s here, a few hundred there, all sliding out like water through a crack. The total matched almost every cent we had saved. I printed the entire file, highlighted each transfer, and slipped the pages into a folder. That evening, while double-checking my math, I noticed the timing lined up with Ava's sudden streak of new clothes and weekend getaways she'd been bragging about on family group texts. Before I made another move, I called a friend from college who now worked in banking compliance. I laid out the situation without names. She explained that with a joint account, either owner can withdraw funds without notice. No crime, no easy legal recourse. Her advice was simple: secure my own finances and close that account. I dug through my old phone backups for proof of how the account started. Screenshots surfaced from years back, Ava and I joking about opening a sister's business fund and agreeing to keep it for future fun projects. The messages showed we both understood its purpose. I printed those too, sliding them behind the bank statements. The next family dinner fell on a Sunday. I arrived with that folder tucked into my bag, but I didn't wave it around. We gathered in the dining room, the table set like a magazine spread. My uncle from out of town joined us, which made the timing almost too perfect. Between passing dishes, I brought it up. I said the joint account had been drained and asked Ava if she'd used the money. Ava barely looked up from her plate. She said she thought I didn't care about that old account anymore, like it was a forgotten wallet. My parents didn't even pause. My mom told me to be the bigger person, that I was doing well and it was just money. My dad nodded along, repeating that it wasn't worth a family fight. Across the table, my uncle froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. He asked how much money we were talking about. When I answered, his eyebrows shot up. He looked at my parents like they'd lost their minds. They changed the subject before he could say more. I didn't argue. I finished my meal, thanked everyone, and left earlier than usual. At home, I pulled out a notebook and began a full audit of anything Ava might still touch. Old streaming services we once shared, utility accounts from when we briefly lived together, even an ancient music subscription. One by one, I changed passwords, removed her name, and confirmed each account was under my sole control. The next morning, I visited the bank in person. I moved the few remaining dollars to a new account in my name only, and asked the teller to close the joint one. She stamped the closure confirmation, and I added it to my growing folder of evidence. With finances locked down, I kept communication with Ava and my parents brief and polite. Group texts about birthdays or neighborhood news got short replies, nothing more. Weeks passed quietly, no surprise charges, no sudden visits. During that stretch, work brought an unexpected spark. My firm announced a new leadership program aimed at grooming regional project leads. It came with a relocation to a bigger city, a salary bump, and a housing stipend. Applications were due in a month. The timing felt like the universe handing me a clean slate. I researched apartments after hours, scrolling through listings of high-rise buildings with sunlit workspaces. I built a private spreadsheet to map budgets, factoring in rent, utilities, and the new salary. Only a trusted coworker knew what I was planning. While the application process moved forward, I kept adding to my folder, bank records, screenshots, closure confirmation, not for revenge, just for my own security. If anyone questioned my decisions, the proof was there. A few days later, HR called to say I'd been accepted into the program. The relocation came with a signing bonus and a clear start date 6 weeks out. I didn't share the news with my family right away. I wanted every detail set before anyone tried to weigh in. Meanwhile, Ava stayed silent. No texts, no casual calls, nothing beyond the occasional forwarded meme from the family group chat. My parents sent the usual reminders about upcoming events, but none of us mentioned the account again. I spent evenings sorting through my apartment, making piles to donate or sell. Each box I sealed felt like another door closing on old patterns. I set up new automatic deposits to my private account and confirmed that my work payroll was already directed there. By the time the program paperwork arrived for my signature, I had my plan in motion. A moving company scheduled, a short-term lease lined up in the new city, a list of contacts ready for the transfer. I even found a high-yield savings account to park the bonus once it hit. Through it all, I stayed cordial with my family. I replied to texts about neighborhood gossip and sent a birthday card to my mom, but I offered no clues about the bigger changes coming. One Friday evening, while packing a bookshelf, I looked over at the folder on my desk. Inside were the highlighted statements, the screenshots of old texts, the closure slip, quiet proof of what had happened. I didn't feel triumphant or angry, just certain. I didn't plan to forgive and forget. I planned to grow beyond it. The account was closed, my finances were protected, and a new chapter was waiting in a city where no one would see me as a walking bank account. With each step, the distance between us widened, not with drama, but with steady, deliberate choices. And that, I realized, was the only response that made sense. I signed the transfer paperwork on a rainy Tuesday morning, the final step to lock in the new role and the salary bump that came with it. HR confirmed the relocation stipend and gave me a start date 3 weeks out. The same afternoon, I arranged a call with the relocation team to go over housing options and moving services. By evening, the plan felt solid enough to move forward without looking back. The next Saturday, I took the train into the new city to start the apartment search. I toured a series of high-rises, each one with floor-to-ceiling windows and enough space for a home office. The third building stole my attention, a corner unit on the 22nd floor with a view of the river and a small alcove perfect for a design workspace. The leasing agent handed me a packet, and I put down a deposit before leaving the lobby. Back home, I kept everything quiet. Only one trusted coworker knew about the move, someone who had covered for me during long interview calls. I wanted no family input, no sudden opinions, no attempts to slow me down. I scheduled a deep cleaning weekend and began sorting my belongings. I filled donation boxes with clothes I hadn't worn in years and listed extra furniture online. Old college textbooks went to a local charity shop. Each item leaving the apartment made the next step feel lighter. When neighbors asked about the boxes stacked near my door, I said I was doing a big spring cleaning. My parents noticed the downsizing first. They stopped by on a Sunday afternoon with a basket of fruit and a few questions. I kept my answers short and cheerful, saying I was reorganizing and making space. They accepted it without much pushback, more interested in the homemade cookies I had cooling on the counter. Between packing sessions, I set up a full financial firewall. I updated every password, banking, insurance, utilities, and double-checked that no account still listed Ava as a beneficiary. I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer downtown to draft a simple will, naming a close friend as executor and primary contact. It was a small step, but it put every important document squarely under my own control. 2 weeks before the move, Ava showed up unannounced. She carried shopping bags stuffed with clothes from a designer outlet and talked about a new vacation she had just booked. She walked through the apartment, eyeing the half-packed boxes and empty shelves, but I offered no details. We had tea at the kitchen counter while she bragged about her plans and the bargain deals she found. I smiled, kept the conversation polite, and never mentioned the move or the promotion. After an hour, she left as quickly as she arrived, none the wiser. That evening, I confirmed the moving date with the company recommended by HR. They scheduled a crew for early Saturday morning, exactly 1 day after my lease would begin in the new city. I used a private email for all communication, separate from anything my family might know. 3 weeks before my start date, I joined my parents and Ava for Sunday dinner. The table was set with the usual perfect detail, candles flickering near the centerpiece of white lilies. After the meal began, I set down my fork and shared the news. I had accepted a promotion and would be relocating to the city in 3 weeks. The words settled over the table like a gust of unexpected wind. My mom clapped her hands together and congratulated me first, though I caught a flicker of surprise in her eyes. My dad followed with a broad smile, saying the move sounded exciting. Ava raised her eyebrows and gave a small shrug. The silence after their initial reactions stretched until my dad suggested that Ava could visit often, maybe even stay a while to get a fresh start. I shook my head lightly and said the new apartment wasn't meant for guests. I explained that the role required focus and privacy. My mom pressed a little, mentioning how nice it would be for sisters to spend time together in a new environment. I repeated that I needed the space for work and wouldn't be hosting anyone for extended stays. Ava leaned back and let out a sharp laugh, calling me too fancy now, her voice tinged with something I couldn't place. She hinted she might drop by anyway, saying it like a half-joke, but with a look that wasn't joking at all. I smiled and replied that I was making space only for what fit in my life now. The words landed like a door clicking shut. No one spoke for a moment. The candles flickered, and even the background music seemed to fade. My uncle, who had joined for dinner again, glanced between us but stayed silent. The rest of the meal passed with lighter conversation about neighborhood news and an upcoming charity drive. Ava barely looked in my direction, focusing instead on her phone. My parents tried to steer the mood back to cheerful, but the quiet boundary I'd drawn held firm. After dessert, I thanked everyone, hugged my parents, and gathered my coat. Ava stayed seated, scrolling, her expression unreadable. I said goodbye to her anyway, and walked out into the cool night air. The next days moved fast. Movers confirmed the schedule and sent digital contracts for signature. I booked a hotel for the night before the move, to keep things smooth. My firm sent onboarding documents for the new office and arranged for a company car to meet me when I arrived. I spent evenings packing the last boxes, kitchenware, framed art, the folder with every record of the joint account incident. Each taped seam felt like a marker between old life and new. Friends from work helped me haul donations to a charity center, and I sold my extra furniture to a neighbor who had just moved in. One night, while folding clothes into a final suitcase, I noticed Ava's name pop up on a group text with a photo of a fancy dinner out. She didn't reach out directly, and I didn't start a conversation either. By the final week, the apartment echoed with emptiness. I left only the essentials for my last nights there: a mattress, a kettle, a single chair by the window. On the morning of the move, I slipped the apartment keys into an envelope for the landlord and took one last walk through the rooms. When the moving crew arrived, they loaded everything quickly. I followed in my car, a small caravan heading toward a new city and a new chapter that no one else had shaped for me. I didn't look back as the skyline of my old neighborhood faded. The future was set, my own apartment waiting, a job that matched my effort, and a life that belonged only to me. The morning before the movers arrived, I double-checked every detail. The moving company confirmed the schedule, the company car service texted a pickup time, and I ran through a final checklist of accounts and subscriptions. Each bill, streaming service, and insurance policy now sat firmly in my name alone. Nothing tied back to anyone else, and that gave me the freedom to leave without loose ends. At work, my manager stopped by my desk with unexpected news. She asked if I would mentor a new hire remotely once I settled in the new city. It was framed as an invitation, not an order, a sign they trusted me to guide someone even from miles away. I accepted with a quick handshake and added it to my growing list of responsibilities for the new role. 2 days before the movers came, I hosted a quiet farewell lunch at a small cafe near the office. I invited a few close coworkers who had supported me through late nights and big projects. We ate sandwiches and laughed about office stories. It was intentionally separate from anything family-related, a clean goodbye to the life I was leaving behind. Later that evening, a mutual friend texted to say Ava had heard about the lunch and wondered why she wasn't included. Not long after, Ava's name lit up my phone with a short message asking the same thing. I replied politely that it was a work event, and left it there. The next day, my parents called. They'd heard from Ava and suggested I have a peaceful chat with her before I left. I thanked them for caring, but said I wanted to keep the farewell simple and focused on work. They didn't push further, though I sensed their hesitation before hanging up. The movers arrived earlier than expected on Saturday morning. With their efficiency, every box and piece of furniture was loaded and on the road before noon, a full day ahead of schedule. I followed in my car, the back seat packed with essentials I didn't trust to anyone else. On the drive to the new city, I stopped at a quiet rest area to deposit the leadership program bonus that had just hit my account. I moved it into a high-yield savings account I'd opened specifically for future plans. With that done, I merged onto the highway and watched the landscape change from suburban streets to wide-open stretches of road. The sense of a clean break settled in as the city skyline came into view. By early evening, the movers had unloaded everything into the high-rise apartment. The unit looked even better than I remembered. Sunlight streamed through the corner windows, painting long stripes across the hardwood floors. I unpacked quickly, setting up a bright workspace in the alcove by the largest window. My laptop and sketchbooks fit perfectly on the new desk I'd ordered in advance. In the kitchen, I stacked dishes into cupboards and lined the pantry with staples from a late-night grocery run. The next morning, I explored the neighborhood. A cafe 2 blocks away served strong espresso and fresh pastries. Around the corner, I found a quiet park with a jogging path that looped around a small lake. A few blocks farther sat a tiny independent bookstore with creaky floors and shelves stacked high with design magazines. The anonymity of it all felt sharp and refreshing. Monday marked my first day at the new office. The building's lobby buzzed with early commuters and the hum of elevators. Colleagues greeted me warmly, guiding me through the open-plan workspace and showing me the best coffee machine on the floor. At lunch, a few team members invited me to a nearby bistro. We talked about projects and the city's best spots for weekend hiking. That evening, once I'd returned to my apartment, I sent a short text to my parents letting them know I'd arrived safely and that my first day had gone well. I added no extra details and received a simple thumbs-up emoji in return. Ava didn't reach out at all. The rest of the week unfolded with a steady rhythm. Each morning, I jogged around the lake before work. Each evening, I unpacked a little more, arranging framed prints and small plants around the apartment until it felt complete. By Friday, the last box was gone, the recycling bin filled with flattened cardboard. Through it all, the silence from Ava continued. No calls, no surprise messages, no sudden appearances. The calm let me focus entirely on settling into the new routine. Saturday brought my first real weekend in the city. I joined a small group from work for a farmer's market visit and later spent hours browsing the bookstore I discovered earlier. The shop owner recommended a new design magazine and promised to set aside future issues for me. By the end of that first week, the apartment truly felt like home. Every corner arranged exactly as I chose, every piece of furniture carrying only the memories I wanted to bring forward. The skyline outside my window glowed at sunset, and the quiet hum of the city below became the backdrop to evenings spent sketching new design ideas. Nothing from the past followed me there. No unexpected knocks, no hidden strings. The life I unpacked in that apartment belonged only to me, built on choices I made without anyone else's approval. Within a month of settling into the new city, work picked up speed. My presentations during early strategy sessions caught the attention of senior staff, and soon I was invited to high-profile planning meetings usually reserved for long-time directors. The leadership program's director stopped by my desk after one session and penciled me in for the next big client pitch. Life outside the office filled out just as quickly. A retired art teacher from my building introduced herself in the lobby one evening and invited me to a casual wine night on her terrace. A young couple from the floor above joined too, and we discovered a shared love for early morning runs. By the end of that week, we'd set up a regular Saturday jogging route that looped around the lakeside park and ended at a small cafe for fresh croissants. After weeks of silence from my sister, a message from Ava lit up my phone late on a Wednesday night. She wrote that an unexpected expense had left her short on rent and asked if I could send a loan. No details, just the amount and a quick plea. I read it twice, then typed a short reply. I couldn't provide financial help. I kept the tone courteous and left it there. The next day, my parents called. They said Ava had overspent and fallen behind and hinted I could help just this once. I thanked them for letting me know, but explained I wouldn't fund Ava. Before they could push, I shifted the conversation to a new project at work, and the client pitch scheduled for the following week. They lingered on the call, suggesting I was being cold. I wrapped up warmly, told them I had an early morning meeting, and wished them a good evening. The conversation ended without tension, but the boundary stayed clear. Back at the office, the major client pitch arrived 2 days later. I presented a full design concept, with detailed visuals and a rollout timeline. The room stayed focused the entire time, and when I finished, the client's lead executive praised the presentation. That afternoon, the firm announced we had won the account. My manager stopped by to thank me personally and promised a bonus review at the next quarter. Saturday brought my first hike with the new group. We met at dawn near the trailhead, a mix of neighbors and coworkers, and spent hours winding through forest paths before finishing at a diner for late breakfast. The easy conversation and steady climb set a rhythm that carried into the rest of the weekend. The following evening, a cousin visiting the city for a conference reached out. We met for coffee near my apartment, and in the flow of conversation, she mentioned that Ava had recently hosted a lavish party back home, catered food, live music, the works. It didn't sound like someone scrambling for rent. I listened without comment and paid the bill before we parted ways. The next week, I hosted my own small gathering at my apartment, inviting the neighbors I'd grown close to and a few coworkers. We cooked simple dishes, opened a few bottles of wine, and let music fill the space. Laughter carried late into the night, the skyline glowing beyond the windows. A few days later, my parents called again, this time suggesting they might visit soon. They hinted they might bring Ava as a surprise so everyone could spend time together. I thanked them for thinking of me but declined, citing a packed project schedule and offering instead to plan a visit home when deadlines eased. They accepted the explanation, though my mom mentioned she missed seeing me. I promised to call more often and ended the conversation on a warm note. By the end of that month, the pattern of my life felt steady and unmistakably my own. Work thrived on a rhythm of high-level meetings and new challenges. Morning runs with the couple upstairs became a fixture. The retired art teacher's terrace turned into a favorite Friday night spot for casual chats under string lights. Each evening, I returned to an apartment that reflected choices made entirely on my terms. Furniture I selected, art I framed, schedules I kept. The distance from the drama back home stayed firm, not from anger, but from a clear line that no one else could cross. As the first cold winds rolled in from the mountains, I booked a small cabin with a group of close friends for a holiday escape. The plan was simple: 3 nights in a quiet spot surrounded by pine trees, with a fireplace, hiking trails, and no pressure to dress up or entertain anyone outside our circle. We confirmed dates, pooled money for groceries, and set a menu heavy on soups, fresh bread, and slow-cooked stews. Back home, my parents began calling more often. The first call came in early December. They asked about my work schedule and suggested I visit for a full family Christmas. I thanked them for thinking of me and explained that I had planned my holiday months earlier. A week later, they called again with the same invitation, mentioning traditions and neighbors who wanted to see me. I kept my tone warm but repeated that the trip was already set with friends. A few days after the second call, I noticed a voicemail from Ava. Her voice sounded lighter than it had in months. She said she wanted to start fresh and reconnect over the holidays, hinting that Christmas would be the perfect time. I waited a few hours before replying with a short text. My schedule was full, and I wished her a pleasant holiday. Work carried a different kind of excitement. The leadership program announced mid-year recognitions, and I received a substantial bonus along with the chance to spearhead a national design project scheduled to launch in spring. The email congratulating me included details for a kickoff meeting with executives from several regions. Outside the office, I found ways to give back to the city that had welcomed me. A local design initiative asked for volunteers to mentor high school students interested in architecture and interior design. I signed up for Saturday sessions, guiding small groups through basic sketching and layout exercises. Their enthusiasm turned those mornings into a highlight of the season. City life found a steady rhythm. As winter deepened, morning runs through crisp air ended with hot coffee at the neighborhood cafe. Evenings brought late-night creative sessions at my drafting table or quiet dinners with friends who felt more like family every week. Strings of lights across the main avenue brightened early sunsets, and the smell of roasted chestnuts drifted from sidewalk carts. One evening, a cousin traveling through my city for work invited me for dinner. Over pasta and warm bread, she mentioned that Ava had been telling relatives I had abandoned the family. In the next breath, she described Ava's new designer shoes and her latest expensive purchases. The contrast spoke for itself. I listened, nodded, and steered the conversation back to my cousin's travel plans. As the holiday approached, I kept in touch with my parents through short calls and cheerful texts. Eventually, they left a voicemail wishing me a happy holiday without pressing for a visit. The gentle acceptance in their voices felt like a small shift, a quiet recognition that my boundaries were firm. On Christmas Eve, I drove with friends up the winding mountain road to the cabin. We unpacked groceries and hung a simple wreath on the door. Snow fell steadily while we cooked together, filling the rooms with the scent of garlic, herbs, and fresh bread. After dinner, we exchanged handmade gifts, a knitted scarf, a framed photo, a set of hand-painted mugs. Laughter bounced off the wooden beams as we played cards late into the night, the fireplace crackling. Back at my apartment a few days later, a small envelope waited in the mailbox. Inside was a handwritten card from my parents. The message was brief but heartfelt. They were proud of my accomplishments and respected the life I was building. I placed the card on my bookshelf beside a small ceramic vase, a quiet reminder that family ties could exist without constant compromise. New Year's Eve came with fireworks over the river and a rooftop gathering hosted by the retired art teacher from my building. We toasted the year's end with sparkling cider and shared plans for the months ahead. As midnight struck, the city lights stretched in every direction, bright and full of possibility. When the first morning of the new year arrived, I laced up my running shoes and joined the couple upstairs for a cold, clear jog around the lake. The skyline glowed in the early sun, and the air carried the sharp freshness of a clean start. With the year closing behind me, I looked ahead to the national project, the mentorship sessions, and the friendships that had taken root. The choices that shaped my days, where I lived, how I worked, the people I welcomed, were mine alone. The quiet card on the shelf reminded me that love from family could stay gentle and respectful, even at a distance. The holidays ended without drama, only the steady certainty of a life defined by boundaries and connections I chose for myself. Spring arrived with longer days and a surge of projects at work. During a Monday meeting, the leadership director called me into her office and offered a new role, Regional Design Director. The position covered multiple states, came with a substantial raise, and included oversight of a large-scale commercial project that would roll out through the summer. I signed the paperwork the same afternoon and scheduled the first planning sessions for the following week. My closest city friends insisted on celebrating. They organized a rooftop dinner on a mild Friday night, stringing lights along the railings and setting out a mix of homemade dishes and takeout from our favorite restaurant. Music played softly over a small speaker while we watched the skyline shift from orange dusk to deep blue. We shared stories about the past year, toasted with sparkling cider, and stayed until the stars filled the sky. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a call from my parents. They invited me to their upcoming summer anniversary party and hoped I could attend. The date fit between project deadlines, and I decided it was a good chance to reconnect on my own terms. I booked a weekend flight and emailed the project team to block the days off. When June arrived, I packed a small carry-on and flew back to my hometown. My parents greeted me at the airport with an easy warmth, and we drove through familiar streets lined with blooming trees. At the house, extended relatives and old neighbors gathered early to help set up for the party. Everyone wanted to hear about the new role and the multi-state project. I shared highlights of the work while helping arrange flowers on the backyard tables. Ava arrived later than most. She offered a brief hello, her voice soft and her eyes sliding past mine. She stayed near a group of cousins, laughing quietly, but rarely glancing in my direction. I returned a polite smile and kept conversation light with the relatives nearby, steering talk toward family updates and neighborhood news instead of anything personal. During a quiet moment in the kitchen, my parents paused to tell me how proud they were of the career I was building. My mom remarked on how confident and composed I seemed. My dad added that he admired the way I balanced independence with family connections. I thanked them while arranging a tray of appetizers, the atmosphere easy and calm. As evening settled, guests gathered under string lights for the anniversary toast. I stood near the garden and raised a glass, giving a short speech about their marriage, their resilience through decades of changes, and the steady support they'd shown both me and Ava. Applause followed, glasses clinked, and the party shifted into music and dancing. Later, as guests lingered near the dessert table, Ava approached quietly and asked if we could talk. We stepped toward a corner of the yard where the lights dimmed to a soft glow. She said she was trying to get her life together and hoped we could have a better relationship. I listened and wished her well, saying I was open to friendly updates at family gatherings, but leaving it at that. There was no promise of more. She nodded once, then rejoined a group of cousins without another word. Throughout the evening, several relatives pulled me aside to compliment the toast and to say they admired the calm way I carried myself. They spoke about how rare it was to see someone maintain family ties without falling into old patterns of conflict. The next morning, I joined my parents for a quiet breakfast on the back porch. Birds chirped in the garden while we shared coffee and fresh pastries. We talked about the party, their plans for a small getaway later in the summer, and the next phases of my project. Before leaving, I thanked them for the celebration and for respecting the life I was building. The flight back to the city was smooth, and by evening I was unpacking in my apartment, slipping easily into familiar routines. The next day began with an early run along the lake, followed by hours of sketching layouts for the regional project and a casual dinner with friends from the hiking group. Work accelerated again, with meetings across time zones and daily progress reviews. Even with the busy schedule, I kept up weekend volunteer sessions with the student design group and the weekly runs with my upstairs neighbors. Each part of my life moved in steady rhythm, balanced between career growth and the friendships that had become my chosen family. Standing by the window one night, watching city lights ripple across the river, I understood that being the bigger person had never meant excusing old betrayals. It meant shaping a life so full and expansive, professionally and personally, that there was simply no space for anyone who once tried to take advantage of me.